I love ice cream. And I don't know if I've ever told you guys this before, but I went 2 years of my life and I ate ice cream for breakfast every single day. Did I tell you guys I was a mess for most of my life? Today, we are talking about the recent science that came out. It's not too long ago, actually. I had my phone here with this is my trusty device for looking up the information. I also have this particular study. It's linked in the description box below. Now, here's the issue. First of all, whenever I heard some people ask me about this, and you may be familiar with Scott Carney. He's a real great guy. I've had him on this channel before. He's the guy who published What Doesn't Kill Us and The Wedge, as well as he's going to be coming out with I think a reprint of The Enlightenment Trap. So check that out. What's up, Scott? If you're watching. But he made a video about this study that came out, and a lot of people saw it, and a lot of people were like, "Hey, Jesse, what do you think about this?" And of course, when I hear this, the thing that always comes to mind is we've had a lot of research that has hinted at this over the years. So cold exposure was hinted at even as early as I remember reading it in 2008, 2007. Now, I wasn't actually reading about it in those days, but I remember whenever I first got into cold training and I was really heavy into it, I remember looking into some research that people were passing around saying, okay, cold exposure could be the cure to cancer. It's something that we can use as a way to mitigate the effects of cancer, or in a lot of different ways we put it. But even as 2007, 2008, people were talking about this. They were kind of, there's some thoughts. So this is something that has been talked about for quite some time. And then recently in Nature. Now, Nature is the probably one of the top 5 publications you can possibly be published in if you're a scientist. So, I mean, it's like the Super Bowl of science. And these researchers, they wrote an article called "Brown Fat Mediated Tumor Suppression by Cold Altered Global Metabolism." They don't ever have really catchy titles. That's always just like make it as as sciencey, I guess, as possible. But they do cite the issue about glucose. So if you guys have been watching this channel, you might have seen my recent episode about glucose and insulin sensitivity, one of the most overlooked issues in the Western world. And it leads to an enormous amount of our health problems. 2 of the biggest killers, cancer and heart attacks, or hypertension, high blood pressure, you name it, can be linked to chronically high insulin levels. Now, the thing is, this is also, you can trace it back to your daily life, right? In the United States, we have this thing called the Standard American Diet. And of course, we all know what the acronym is for that. It's SAD, right? SAD, Standard American Diet. And it is really sad what the Standard American Diet is, what we feed our kids at school, what we eat, so there's a booming industry in processed foods, sugary foods. And this is something that it started in the early 1900s when there was this big research. There's a lot of research on, okay, we have a lot of heart disease. What is causing all this heart disease? And there were 2 major scientists, and they were just incredibly brilliant scientists. And one said it's the sugar. The other said it's the fat. And I don't know if it's a conspiracy theory or not, but the sugar industry seemed to be okay with saying, hey, it's that fat that's going to kill you, right? And nowadays we know just what the ramifications are. Nowadays we have a lot of obesity. And I think this is something that it's a difficult subject to tackle because there's so much, there's so much emotion around this. And so when I'm talking about this, please do not take this as, shaming or anything like that. But we need to talk about it in a just general, in a frank way, and talk about its connection to cancer and high blood pressure and all these other things. And then we're going to talk about how cold exposure comes into play. But when it comes down to the standard American diet or the Western diet, which is high in carbohydrates, high in sugars, what we have happening in our bodies is that your body it has to use those sugars. It has to figure out how to make this work, right? And so what it does is it shoots out insulin. So your pancreas shoots out insulin, and the reason why it does that is so that the cells can accept the glucose, can be used by the mitochondria, create energy, and so on and so forth. Well, the issue happens here. When you have a large amount of glucose and a regular chronic amount of glucose, your cells become resistant to the insulin that normally would have opened them up so that they can accept the sugar. They say, man, there's insulin, just like we're floating in insulin all the time. So we can't just constantly be open. So we're going to resist that insulin and only open up whenever maybe there's a lot of insulin. Okay. And so when that happens, okay, this can be a person, and it's very difficult to test for this. It's very difficult to test for this. And it's not necessarily, it doesn't just happen after you've gained, 30 pounds. It happens much earlier than that. And it can be stopped. It's just, we have to start understanding how this affects us and how it works. And what initially it starts to do is you start to have cravings for sugar because we need more sugar to produce more insulin so that that high amount of insulin can open up the cell. Well, now we have more sugar to deal with. Okay, so there's this whole chronic problem that starts. Now, the issue with insulin, okay, and this is why it's so important to have a handle on this before it gets out of control. Because once you've let it go for a long period of time, it gets really hard to come back. It's not impossible, and cold training can help you with that as well. Okay, we'll get to that in a minute. So, but what happens is, okay, so we have this chronic cycle of, okay, we need so much insulin and we need more glucose because we need more insulin in order to use the glucose that's already in there, but we got tons of glucose. So here's the thing. We know that cancer cells, especially, when we're talking about tumors and things like that, they use about 10 to 100 times as much glucose as your regular cells. They're really not very efficient. And so they need high glucose. They need that in order to survive. Now, here's the issue. So you're already high glucose. You're just like, I like, ice cream. And I got to say, guys, I love ice cream. And I don't know if I've ever told you guys this before, but I went 2 years of my life and I ate ice cream for breakfast every single day. Did I tell you guys I was a mess for most of my life? I saw an article one time saying that ice cream was the perfect breakfast. It's a total lie. It's a total lie. You get the sugar high and then you get the sugar crash. And then the next thing you know, you're just like brain dead. But then the next morning, ice cream sounds like a really good idea. And so, yeah, I was a mess. Anyway, so we have all of this glucose floating through our blood, and it's also causing us to have high levels of insulin. And in order for us to be able to accept that glucose, we need even higher levels of insulin. Now, what happens is we see the process, eventually this leads to what we call pre-diabetes, and then eventually diabetes type 2. And what happens is eventually your pancreas cannot keep up. Eventually, your pancreas says, okay, I'm producing as much insulin as I possibly can, and it's still not enough to open up those cells to accept the glucose. And that's whenever people start taking supplemental insulin. And, and it goes on and on and on. And so what happens here is, of course, it leads to incredible weight gain and things like that. But even on if you just look at what's in your blood, you've got high insulin, high sugar. Now, insulin, the reason why you don't want to have high insulin all the time, okay, it's okay to have it now and then, whenever you eat something, you want insulin, you want to make sure to use that up. But if you have high insulin, what that does, it leads to increased cell replication. So if you have increased cell replication, you have a higher risk to produce a cancerous cell. if you have increased cell replication, right? Let me just say it again. You have a higher risk to produce a cancerous cell. So if you chronically have more cells replicating and you chronically have high levels of glucose, and cancer cells need 10 to 100 times more glucose than everyday, regular healthy cells, you see how this is a recipe for disaster, right? You see how the standard Western diet, I'll say standard Western diet because I'm going to include my European friends in this, but standard American diet, you see how it is perfectly situated for cancer. And it also, there's all the other things that come with it. Chronic stress, and it's difficult to sleep. It's terrible on your joints. I mean, there's a lot of things that also come along the road. So we see that diet influences this in ways that oftentimes we don't think about. Yes, you shouldn't smoke. That's just ridiculous. Yes, avoid carcinogens, obviously. But simply ingesting sugar regularly, chronically, and not listening to the fact that your body is trying to speak back to you and saying, hey, I can't really keep up with all the sugar you're cramming down my throat, that leads to a higher risk for cancer in the first place. Okay. Now, that leads me to the article in Nature, but I wanted to cover that first. I hope you guys don't mind the fact that I covered that first, because that's really important to the story. Like, our diet is essential. And actually, if you look at this study, okay, so, and again, the link is in the description box. So they did research on, first they did it with mice, and then they actually did, they had a person with Hodgkin's lymphoma that they did some research on, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And I'm only going to speak in Fahrenheit. What? I'm only going to give Fahrenheit numbers. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, they took these mice and they did some extreme temperatures. They showed that they did a number of studies, but ultimately it showed that when they gave the mice a low sugar diet, even those with cancer, so they all had tumors, cancerous tumors, they had the low sugar diet. And then when they added cold exposure, that it started to starve those tumors, which is like, wow, that is freaking amazing, right? Right. That right there. Think about that. Did I say what they were injected with? No, because they didn't have to be injected with anything. Did I say what kind of pills they were taking? No. I said instead of giving them high sugar, they just fed them less sugar, right? They gave them a low sugar diet. And then all I said was, then they exposed them to cold temperatures. Wow, that's pretty incredible. So this research is really profound. This is really some really great research that's come out, and it does point to the application of cold exposure for treating cancer and for possibly, keeping us from getting cancer. But here's the big but. Okay. They also showed that when they took these mice with cancerous tumors and they fed them the regular sugary diet, the cold exposure did not help. So here's the thing. It's got to be both. And this is something that for years people have been talking about because of the way that brown fat works. So brown fat, or brown adipose tissue, BAT, is something that all of us have. We have it in our, it's basically between our shoulder blades, and then maybe little tiny little bits. Some of us have it there. But the reason why they call it brown fat is because it actually is brown. It's beige. It's a darker color than what we call white fat. That's the fat that we normally think about that's on our bodies and our tummies and our butts and all these things, right? So the reason why they call it brown fat is because there are far more mitochondria. So mitochondria, the function of a mitochondria is to produce cellular energy. And what brown fat will do, it will induce it induces thermogenesis. And what happens is, okay, so when you expose your body to 71 degrees Fahrenheit, and you can look it up. Okay, that's 21 degrees Celsius. Anyway, when you, and that's not very cold. My house right now is colder than that. And so I'm just, so I'm constantly getting a little bit of cold exposure. That actually was a huge surprise. So for most of us, we thought, okay, you need to get down into the 60s Fahrenheit, which would be the teens, like kind of like the, I don't really know, somewhere around like 17, I think, Celsius. Now that is just a shot in the dark. But when we say, okay, right around 70 Fahrenheit, which is just below what we would consider to be room temperature. So 72 degrees Fahrenheit is what most people consider to be room temperature. Here I am going into frozen over lakes and things. And a lot of people, I think they think that if you're doing cold exposure, it has to be ice baths. And this study clearly showed that that's not the case. And they just had this guy, and he had Hodgkin's lymphoma, and they had him on a low sugar diet in a relatively cool room. I wouldn't even say it's chilly at 21 Celsius, okay, or 71 Fahrenheit. I wouldn't say that's even chilly. I would say that's walking around in my underwear temperature, which maybe I'll do later today. But I won't submit you to that. But the thing is, I wouldn't call that cold at all. I wouldn't call it cold. I wouldn't call that, even average person walking around who doesn't take cold showers. Those people wouldn't call that cold. So, taking a cold shower, taking an ice bath, what these do is they activate the brown fat in a more robust way, which is why, hey, great. You can either stay in a relatively cool room, I guess, for long periods of time, or hey, man, go and really activate that stuff in an ice bath or a cold shower. Now, there's no research, as far as I know, that makes any kind of a sliding graph. Hey, if you stay in, 20 degrees Celsius, for this amount of time, it's just like staying in 18 degrees Celsius for this amount of time. And the reason for that is, and if there's ever a graph that shows that, I'm going to be skeptical, because we're all so different. Like, there's a lot of variation in our species. And this is something that a lot of times in the health and wellness world that completely is forgotten. People say, well, how much should I take to get what result? And you have to understand, anytime those figures are tallied, there's always outliers. Like, this is why everything, it's always, results may vary, my friends. Even if they're like, yeah, this much does this, just assume that they're saying, well, there were a few people that it gave them diarrhea, but other than that, most people had this result and it was fine. Results will always vary because we have a lot of variation in our species. But it is safe to say that the colder that you are in, the more robust reaction of brown fat. And that means you're shredding through more glucose. And going back to why brown fat is called brown fat, it's because it has so much mitochondria. The mitochondria, they gobble up the glucose. So they eat oxygen and they eat glucose. And they produce ATP, which is cellular energy, which makes you warm. It warms the body before you have to shiver. So whenever you get to the shivering phase, oh my God, I'm shivering, which is there's nothing wrong with that. And Joseph Coburl, who he's broken the world record for the longest ice bath twice. Like, I forget the last one. I think it was like 2.5 hours, maybe 3 hours. It's ridiculous. This guy is just insane. He's awesome. He's a really, and like most people like him, he's just like the super nice guy. But he's like, no, man, shivering is fine. Shivering is just fine. And it is. But brown fat is what keeps you warm before you even have to shiver. Well, they've also shown that the more often a person is in the cold, a person who cold trains regularly tends to have more brown fat. So, the way I interpret this information, okay, these are the big takeaways that I would say that we should claim. All right. So if you go out there and you tell someone that cold training cures cancer, you're a dumbass. Okay. That is not what we should be saying. We should be saying a low sugar diet combined with regular cold training has been shown in some research to starve cancerous tumors. Okay. In mice for sure. And for instance, in this one case with this guy with Hodgkin's lymphoma. So in this study, it was interesting. They had this guy and they set him in this kind of a chilly room. He was kind of in a chilly room for 3 days in a low sugar diet. And his tumor started to starve. And basically they say, basically, if we would have kept him in there, it implies that it would have completely died. Then they switched him over to a room that was about 85 degrees Fahrenheit, which is summer weather. I don't know what that would be in Celsius, but that's summer weather, outdoors summer weather. And the effects were not there either. So both of them were essential. Okay. The cold definitely plays an active role, but cold training by itself, you can't say it cures cancer. You have to say, research shows that in at least in mice and in some humans, so far we can say that a low sugar diet combined with regular cold exposure is, at least in my opinion, something that is very promising for prevention of cancer and for the treatment of cancer.